Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. This is Boris Tizengauzen with you. Today is October 14th. There are a lot of interesting news stories in this episode. The US may actually provide Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles. Volodymyr Zelensky is flying to Washington to discuss things that can't be talked about over the phone. And yesterday, at one of the military exhibitions, it was shown that there are also ground-based platforms from which Tomahawks can be launched, and these could be supplied to Ukraine. Lukashenko threw a real tantrum, and we'll talk about how India tried to trick the US with Russian oil. Meanwhile, South Korea is building civilian bunkers to protect against the unpredictable Kim Jong-un. Zuckerberg, Altman, and Thiel are also going underground. How bunkers for the super rich are being built all over the world. And in the Baltic countries, fans of the Russian world got a rude awakening. All this and more will be covered in today's episode, with lots of interesting topics. So if you're new to this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. There's an interesting twist with the Tomahawk missiles. The US has unexpectedly unveiled a mobile launch platform for Tomahawk missiles, and each launch container can hold 4 missiles at once. The American company Oshkosh Defense has introduced a new line of MAV mobile launchers for Tomahawk missiles. They announced this on their website. I checked the website myself. It's a beautiful, impressive, ground-based mobile launcher. There are also 2 smaller ones, but they're meant for slightly different purposes. So there are platforms to launch from, because before this, there were ongoing debates about the fact that, yes, there were only 2 of these launch batteries, and that no one would provide them. But here it turns out, there you go, and look how timely it is. This exhibition where this mobile launcher is being showcased is the Association of the United States Army exhibition, which is happening right now. To be precise, it started yesterday and will continue today and tomorrow. See how perfectly timed it all is. And that's exactly why, I think, statements started pouring in from Russia. God forbid, don't even think about it, that would be a completely different level, and so on. And on top of that, Volodymyr Zelensky is flying to the US on the 17th of this month for a personal meeting with Donald Trump to discuss matters that can't even be talked about over the phone. I wonder, what kind of matters could those be? So, this meeting has been announced, and first of all, the main topic will be providing Ukraine with air defense systems and long-range strike capabilities to put pressure on Russia. So this will be a continuation of those phone conversations that took place on October 11th and 12th, just recently. Moreover, by the way, here's an interesting clarification. During these phone conversations, Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump discussed Russian attacks on our Ukrainian energy sector and the possibility of supplying Tomahawks. And these Tomahawks, military targets also include Russian energy infrastructure objects. That's an important clarification. So, and here experts, citing former Pentagon officials, say that the US could supply Ukraine with a limited number of Tomahawk missiles, from 20 to 50 missiles. According to the Financial Times, such a quantity would not have a significant impact on the course of hostilities. Well, look, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, if just one missile hits the bald cabin, you know who I mean, it would definitely have an impact, and on the whole war too. And the topic is so sensitive for Russia that first they sent out Medvedev, who decided to personally threaten Trump. In other words, Putin's battle gnome has completely lost his sense of fear. And today, the Agroführer Lukashenko joined in as well. Look at what he came up with. Well, you know, Lukashenko is like Putin's puppet interpreter. Whenever something needs to be said, and they don't want it to look completely cringe, they don't let Medvedev speak. They let Lukashenko do it. He tries to please both sides, sitting on 8 splits at once, and so on. So Lukashenko came out and declared that supplying Tomahawks to Ukraine would escalate the situation to nuclear war. No Tomahawks are going to solve the problem. This only escalates the situation. Donald Trump understands this better than anyone. I'm quoting Lukashenko here, who is in no hurry to hand over this deadly weapon or to allow strikes deep into Russia, as President Zelensky is hoping for. Lukashenko said, "Listen, but they already used ATACMS, didn't they?" They did. So what's the problem? What is it? Well, of course, the range is different and all that, but Lukashenko also believes that the Americans, this is so typical of Lukashenko, that the Americans saw Minsk as one of the mediators in resolving the war. Well, of course, I suppose the Americans saw all of this. If the Americans want to end this war and see our modest role in it, says Lukashenko, then we are ready to participate. No way, dear friend, you're not a mediator at all. You're an accomplice in this war. Ukrainians remember very well how Russian troops entered from the territory of Belarus. They entered in such a treacherous way, just like that, how missiles were launched from Belarusian territory. And they remember perfectly well, and the whole world remembers Bucha and Irpin, as well as how Russian troops loaded up, having ripped everything they could carry out of Ukrainian apartments and houses, packed it all up and headed back to Belarus, like an orcish tribe, returning laden with this loot. But it's interesting, isn't it, how the rhetoric has changed. I remember Lukashenko was sitting there saying, yes, Putin is sparing Ukraine. Come on, if he wanted to, he could conquer all of Ukraine in no time. And now, oh no, don't hit Russia with Tomahawks. It will be a huge disaster. So what happened, huh? Well, since we've already mentioned the king of the potatoes, let me remind you that according to Lukashenko, Russian troops didn't attack Ukraine, they just decided to take a shortcut home. They were coming from Belarus, and if you look at the map, they supposedly decided to cut through Ukraine to get back to Russia. And then someone offended them here, and the convoys just started destroying residential buildings, planes landed in Gomel and so on, helicopters and so forth. I mean, how strong does the potato starch have to be to come up with something like that? And more importantly, to actually think that someone would believe it? And since they dragged the expired potato pancake out of the closet and made him threaten nuclear war, it's clear, discussions about supplying Tomahawks are definitely underway. And Zelensky didn't just fly to Washington on the 17th for no reason. And Zelensky, for his part, claims that if Tomahawk missiles are supplied to Kyiv, they will only be used against military targets, which, by the way, now include energy facilities. Putin previously said that this would mark a fundamentally new stage of escalation and would destroy relations between Moscow and Washington. What relations? Oh, please. As if they were getting along so well, right? Putin gave Trump a portrait as a gift. I don't know, the only thing he didn't do was write him poetry. He gave Lukashenko a ring. Trump, by the way, gave Lukashenko cufflinks. So now Lukashenko is the most beautiful princess in Belarus. So, regarding the claim that nothing will change, Putin also repeated that Tomahawk missiles won't change anything on the battlefield. But Putin is being disingenuous. Well, of course, they won't change things on the battlefield, but they could make a significant difference in Russia's rear, inside Russia itself. And sometimes that's even better. That is, strikes on energy facilities, oil refineries, and port infrastructure are direct hits to Putin's military wallet. And major arsenals will also be within range. Let me remind you, Russia has carried out arsenal modernization, but far from all of them have been upgraded. There are some places where, well, thousands of tons of ammunition are stored in ordinary hangars, and they can detonate for a very long time. But the ones who are truly changing the situation right on the battlefield are our defenders. Friends, let me remind you, we have an important fundraiser going on for the 101st Brigade. We are raising money for ground-based robotic systems. These are unmanned vehicles for evacuating the wounded. In other words, first of all, they save the lives of medics, who no longer have to go out under shelling and bullets to pick up wounded soldiers, because often that can end in tragedy. The unmanned evacuation vehicle is a new development in warfare. The soldier is transported to a safe distance. There, medics can save his life. That's why these things are so necessary. We're raising funds for these termite robotic systems for the 101st Brigade. The soldiers have recorded a special message for us. Please take a look at it.
Ми, бійці 101-ї бригади охорони, звертаємось до Бориса Тізенгаузена та його підписникам за допомогою. Ми дуже вдячні вам за раніше надані дрони. На сьогодні нам дуже потрібні 2 наземні роботизовані комплекси «Терміт» для швидкої і своєчасної евакуації поранених з поля бою, що у теперішній ситуації дозволить врятувати їх життя. Наші підрозділи воюють на Константинівському напрямку та Часовому Ярі. Продовжуємо нищити ворога і віримо в вашу допомогу. Слава Україні!
So friends, in this case, your donations are truly saving lives. And for that, I always say a huge thank you to you, both from myself and from our defenders. And I'll take the liberty to say, on your behalf as well, a huge, huge thank you to our defenders. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There you'll find private, mono, and PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. And my deepest gratitude to you as well. I see everyone and I thank you all. And if for some reason you don't see the payment details, here's a QR code. You can also use it to go to the fundraiser. The release of hostages, the end of a story that hasn't ended. So now we're moving to the Middle East. Hamas, after this agreement was fundamentally reached, as you've probably seen in all those videos, pickups full of militants with weapons. They drive around the ruins of Gaza, celebrating some kind of victory, though it's unclear what, and carry out public executions of collaborators as they see it. In other words, the fanatics are celebrating a triumph, even though they lost the war. Remember how in Iran, after the strikes on nuclear facilities, they came out and started celebrating some kind of victory in the squares? What victory? Or maybe they really are celebrating a victory. Or maybe Hamas is right about something here. They did the impossible. Just like back in the year 1966, when a significant and controversial exchange took place, where they released hundreds of dangerous terrorists in exchange for the safe return of a mere couple dozen of their own captured personnel who were held as prisoners. And once again, Israel is forced, albeit indirectly, to negotiate through Qatar and Egypt with those who killed, took their children, women, and elderly hostage. And Hamas once again finds itself at the center of the political process, now set to control humanitarian aid, access to the sector, and internal logistics. So in fact, all that's left is to continue governing Gaza. They don't really intend to disarm, yet the peace plan called for the complete removal of Hamas from power. That was an absolutely correct decision. In other words, their only role was supposed to be as mediators in the hostage exchange and then goodbye. But no, they decided they're not going anywhere. And now the main question is, isn't this actually their victory? So who actually won here? Maybe Hamas just bought themselves some time? Because with a bit more time for military operations, yes, they really would have reached the underground tunnels. By the way, one of the conditions was to destroy all these underground tunnels. Well, in general, Gaza is destroyed. And in fact, once again, it will be the residents of Gaza who pay for all this, although from what I saw in the videos, they don't seem all that opposed. The fanatics won't give up on the idea of war because fanaticism can't be cured by any logic. The destroyed homes will be rebuilt by international organizations, foundations, the UN, and humanitarian missions. But here's the question, won't the money once again end up going through Hamas or affiliated structures for the same tunnels and weapons caches? Well, in general, the question is, how long will this victory last? And it's true, I agree with Trump that it was precisely the strikes on Iran on the head of this hydra that led to this process. Isn't it entirely possible that after a significant period of time, both the primary head and the numerous, sprawling tentacles of this formidable hydra will meticulously draw their own conclusions and subsequently carry out an even more intricate and sophisticated and even bloodier operation? Isn't that possible? And by then, Iran might already have nuclear weapons. Well, basically, what I'm getting at is this. It's wonderful that the hostages have been returned. Unfortunately, many hostages were killed. But is this the end of the story? I don't think so. I think this is just the very beginning. Of course, Iran won't give up on developing nuclear weapons. They'll hide it, better bury it deeper and keep building, and Russia will actively help them with this. Remember how Medvedev said, and what if Russia suddenly, no, not that, what if someone gives nuclear weapons to Iran? And then Medvedev flew in from Donald Trump and said, what's this? Who is even croaking about the word nuclear? Who is saying this? Well, Iran is currently enriching uranium up to 60%. This is above civilian standards, noticeably higher. In general, Hamas is not going anywhere, as history shows. If the terrorists are not finished off, if their leadership is not destroyed, if their sponsors are not clearly told that if your proxies show up again, we will start hunting you, then they will still come back and cause new harm, unfortunately. In other words, the fanatical Ayatollah regime does not disappear, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps does not disappear either, nor does Hezbollah, well, in general. Strength and resilience to Israel and its citizens. You know what to do. And Ukraine has decided to strip Russia of its title as a gas station country. It looks like the largest oil depot in occupied Crimea is done for. As a result of the drone attack on the oil depot in Feodosia, 11 huge storage tanks were damaged. There used to be 34 of them there in total, so soon there will be nothing left at all. And just imagine, this is the supply of fuel for the Russian southern group. Well, that's it, not a gas station country anymore. And they could have brought fuel into occupied Crimea, but the nearest oil refineries were also visited by Ukrainian drones in Krasnodar Krai, including in southern Russia. So that's how it turned out. That's how it happened. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Those who are subscribed to this channel know this effect well, and for those who aren't, feel free to use it to your advantage. In general, we've found through experience that those who subscribe to the channel have softer and silkier hair. So go ahead and subscribe. And here's an interesting point. I think you've heard about how Trump criticized Steve Witkoff for his 5-hour negotiations with Putin. And I quote, Trump said that Witkoff had no idea about Putin, no idea about Russia, and he was completely unprepared for the negotiations. According to Trump, he expected the meeting to last about 20 minutes, but the conversation dragged on for 5 hours. And I quote Donald Trump, I arranged a meeting for him with Putin, thought it would take 15 to 20 minutes. Steve knew nothing about Russia, almost nothing about Putin, and wasn't particularly interested in politics. He was good at real estate, but he had the quality I was looking for, said Trump. And Trump added that he kept calling every half hour, and they kept telling him, he's still talking, he's still inside, they're still talking after an hour, after 3, after 4. And after that, when Witkoff came out, Trump said, what the hell? What did you talk about for 5 hours? And Witkoff replied a little bit of everything, a lot of interesting topics. We discussed what we came for. Trump said, but no one talks about that for 5 hours. Well, look, making Witkoff the scapegoat for the fact that the talks with Putin didn't happen and there's no progress, that's certainly convenient. But who, with such skills, such qualities, with no knowledge of Putin, no knowledge of Russia, no knowledge at all, who, A, appointed him as special representative for Russia, and B, sent him there? Explain that. They should have sent General Kellogg there. He would have figured out in 20 minutes that the mangy moth doesn't want any peace. The only way to deal with it is with diklorvos, that is tomahawks, or maybe something even more serious. I can only imagine how much that suffocating moth Witkoff managed to say in 5 hours. Which layer of history was he drawing from? The Pechenegs, the Polovtsians. Did he give them the famous folder with the ribbons? Take a look inside. I've put everything together for you there. It says why Ukraine shouldn't exist and that I apparently am the new emperor of the galaxy. Here's another piece of news. The homeland of Mithun Chakraborty is, to put it mildly, not behaving very nicely. I'm talking about India. Now I'll move on to an interesting story about how India is trying to trick the US a little bit. But since it's India, I can't help but remember moments from my childhood, how I used to go to the cinema to watch Indian movies. I think those of you who, like me, are from the Mesozoic era probably went to Disco Dancer, Dance, Jimmy Jimmy, Acha Acha, all that stuff. And you have to admit, it was a completely unique kind of cinema. I remember, well, the fact that they'd fight, then dance, fight, then dance, that was always the case. But I remember one action movie where there was this guy with metal teeth. He lived in a grave, would come out from there. Well, he hid there with metal teeth, and I remember it so clearly. He just took and bit off a car door with his metal teeth. And by the way, the main villain in all their movies is played by the same actor. By the way, why do I even remember all this? I don't know. So India decided it could outsmart the US, tried to be clever, and started buying Russian oil not for state-owned refineries, but for private ones instead. And today I came across some good news. India's state-owned refineries have cut their purchases of Russian oil by half. That's actually true, by more than 45%. Well, this happened because the structure of imports changed and due to political pressure from the United States. But while the state-owned refineries are cutting their purchases, the private ones are actually increasing theirs by about the same number of barrels. So basically, it turns out that, well, yes, the sanctions are against the state, but we can't say anything to the private players. They keep buying where they always have. So it's clear that they're being crafty, but the tariffs that Donald Trump imposed on India, while not 500%, still gave some people a jolt. Now, the 19th sanctions package will give some people a bit of a jolt too, and I hope that sanctions against the rest will as well. The tankers of the Shadow Fleet, everyone knows them perfectly well. In fact, there are even flags of countries that they constantly use. And with them, it's just a matter of having explanatory talks so that they don't allow re-registration, don't provide their flags, don't cover for them, and so on. There are plenty of ways to clamp down on this Shadow Fleet, if only there was the will. That's the main question. And in fact, the news is that more and more people are starting to think about, when it comes to personal or collective shelters, here in Ukraine, everyone knows where their shelter is. Well, if there is one nearby. But sometimes there aren't any shelters close by, at least not serious ones that could protect you from a Shahed drone, for example. In general, people are not just thinking about it anymore, they're actively building, and not just shelters that can save you from a Shahed drone or a missile strike, but ones that could protect you from nuclear war or a pandemic. This is really a trend, especially after the pandemic, and even more so when the war started. I remember about 6 months in, an acquaintance of mine called me and was asking about something. He says, "Did you know there's some kind of project going on right now?" My acquaintance, some businessman from England, said they're planning to build some kind of underground city in Portugal. I said, "No, I haven't heard about that." Well, there you have it. For the first time, South Korea is going to build a civilian nuclear bunker because of threats from North Korea and, of course, from Russia. It was Putin who pulled this trigger. Everyone started arming themselves. Everyone started thinking about their own nuclear weapons because, as we can see, guarantees written on paper, like the Budapest Memorandum, you know perfectly well what can be done with them. But if you have your own nuclear weapons, that's a different story. And the nuclear club, the dictatorship club, not nuclear, but dictatorship club, will soon be entirely nuclear. Russia will help Iran. North Korea apparently already has it. China and Russia itself are nuclear powers. Even Lukashenko, Putin gave him a couple of nuclear Iskanders. Well, that's how it is. They think that Kim Jong-un, well, he's already lost his mind, but they worry he might completely lose it, so they're going to build civilian bunkers. They're small, only about 1,000 people or so can fit inside. Well, if you compare that to the whole population. But I started Googling this topic, and it turns out Sam Altman, Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, they're all building underground shelters for themselves to protect against potential threats. That is, from nuclear war, from a pandemic. Armored walls, well, basically each has their own. Zuckerberg's is about 5,000 square feet. He's building it somewhere in the mountains in Hawaii with some tunnels and so on. It's called a storm closet or something like a storm basement. Well, Peter Thiel is building his own bunker in New Zealand, and in the state of Virginia, they're building an underground bunker to protect the 625 richest people in the world. But that seems more like a PR project to me. Still, I saw some preview photos. Everything there is really luxury class. Pools, suites, and so on. They plan to open it already in 2026. To live there, you'll have to pay $20 million. Basically, what used to seem like some kind of scenario from science fiction movies are becoming reality. Remember all those films about some project usually called something like Secret or Project Ark, where the idea is to save everyone, but in the end, everyone dies. For some reason, it seems to me that if tomorrow Elon Musk says, "Let's go to Mars, everything's ready for colonization," then dozens, maybe hundreds of the world's wealthiest people would buy spots on that rocket without a second thought. I think they're already prepared to pay the full price in advance. Who knows what might come out of a Chinese lab tomorrow, or maybe not even from China. Instead of, by the way, just getting rid of or somehow making a few people who went insane and caused all this just a little less alive. These nuclear arms races continue to be controlled by nuclear states and so on. Instead of burying just a few people underground, the whole world itself has decided to bury itself underground or leave the planet. Humanity stubbornly tries to destroy the Earth as if we have another planet to move to. People, please, just stop already. Although there should probably be more reasonable people, that's no longer a given. So let's put it this way. What this world needs is for all the good people to just get together and kill all the evil ones. That's it. That's the approach. Here's a piece of news I just couldn't ignore. Kadyrov has already received his 36th award. Can you imagine? I was wondering, which one is it this time? Now you have to specify, was it the younger or older son or the father? This time it was the father who got it. The 36th one, for the younger one, it's about 30. Soon, by the way, for the younger one, I don't know, maybe they'll even pass a law so that medals and orders can be worn on the back now. I think he doesn't lose weight on purpose, so there's more space to hang all of them. So Kadyrov received an award for developing the farming movement in Russia. He already has the title of Honored Farmer. He got that in 2021. What kind of farming movement is that? I just remember, he also has an award for contributing to improving digital literacy among school children. He has every kind of award you can imagine. You wouldn't believe it. I just remember when Kadyrov was speaking in front of young people, he was saying something in his made-up language, and then suddenly he dropped to the stage and just started doing push-ups. So basically, in any unclear situation, just do push-ups. And just out of curiosity, I checked what other awards he has. Honored Human Rights Defender of the Chechen Republic. Now that's a good one. Order of Merit in Dentistry First Class. This is not a joke, this is not a joke. And here's another piece of news. It's quite telling for understanding what the Russian world is. Just how much it really it pushes in, it forces its way, and it's pretty hard to get rid of it, to root it out. An interesting incident happened on the border between Latvia and Estonia. In Latvia, there's a member of the Riga City Council named Roslikov, although in my opinion he shouldn't even be called Roslikov. He's a big fan of the Russian world, openly supports Russia, and even threatens Latvians from the podium and so on. In other words, he's a completely hardcore supporter of the Russian world. And he decided to go to Estonia because there are municipal elections there, so he wanted to go support the Russian world a bit, but at the Estonian border they turned him around and sent him back to Latvia. Really, they should have sent him to Russia, not back to Latvia. If you like the Russian world so much, then immerse yourself in it completely and without reservation. In Ukraine, we had similar types as Roslik in the OPZZ party. Many of them fled Ukraine when the war started, you see. Traitors know which way the wind is blowing, and the main boss of this whole OPEZ crowd was Medvedchuk. Putin's guy, the one we later exchanged. That's really the only good thing Medvedchuk ever did in his life. He was swapped for our guys, for our heroes. But how many more Rosliks like that are there in Europe? How many Russian agents are still at large? Safe houses. The country is just a parasite. They just keep pushing in everywhere aggressively. Today Russia hit a hospital in Kharkiv with a guided bomb. Even if you bring one of these Rosliks to a place where civilians are dying every day, he'll still go on supporting the Russian world afterwards. There are such individuals, and they are absolutely shameless. Psychopaths, money, and power. That's how it is. By the way, we talked in one of our programs about psychopaths and narcissists in power in politics. There's just an abnormal number of them there. And as long as there are so many of them and money is their top priority, there will be statements from Orban, there will be statements from Fico, and Putin's job will get easier. Well, as we say in Ukraine, we have to do our own thing. So take care of yourselves and let's help our defenders, help them close this fundraiser, find evacuation vehicles. It's very important right now. Take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and subscribe. Wishing us all a peaceful day, and glory to Ukraine.